Hello, dear. If you're hearing this, thank you. I don't know who you are, or how you found this message. But if you believe in strange things, in impossible things, then please stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you will sound completely mad. And maybe I am mad, but if even one person listens with an open heart, maybe I won't feel so alone anymore. My name is Margaret Evelyn Ross. I'm 87 years old, or at least they tell me I am. But in my mind, I'm still 16. I was 16 the last time things made sense, the last time I closed my eyes. The year was 1954. Eisenhower was president. We listened to Elvis on the radio, danced in diners, and shared milkshakes with 2 straws. My favorite color was lavender. I had a crush on James Wycliffe. He worked at the gas station. I had plans, dreams, all the silly things teenage girls think about. But then one night, everything changed. I remember getting ready for bed. Mama had just kissed my forehead. I could hear my father's soft humming from the next room. I climbed into bed, curled under my quilt, and whispered a little prayer. The same one I said every night. And then, I opened my eyes. But it wasn't morning. It wasn't my room. The bed felt cold. The sheets were thin and white. There were beeping machines around me, a screen with glowing lights, and a woman wearing strange clothes stood beside me, holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Ross?" she asked. Her voice was kind but cautious. "You're awake. It's 2025. You've been in a coma." I laughed. Of course I laughed. Because who wouldn't? That had to be a joke, or a dream, or a movie I'd fallen asleep watching. But then she showed me a mirror, and the face staring back at me wasn't mine. It was a stranger, wrinkled, gray-haired, eyes that looked like they'd seen 1,000 winters. I screamed. I remember screaming so loudly the machine started beeping faster. They called for someone, a doctor, I think, and gave me something to calm me down. When I woke up again, everything was still strange, still quiet, still not my world. They told me I'd been in a coma for over 70 years, that I had no family left, that I was found in an abandoned hospital wing, part of some long-forgotten medical program during the Cold War. They said it was a miracle I survived, that I must have been preserved in some cryogenic-like state by accident. But I don't remember any of that. No accident, no laboratory, no program. All I remember is my warm bed in 1954, my mother's kiss, my lavender pajamas, and then this. Everything here feels wrong. The world is fast, loud, bright. Everyone talks to little glowing rectangles. Cars don't have keys. No one smiles at strangers. Even the sky looks different. I keep telling myself this is a dream, that I'll wake up tomorrow and it'll be 1954 again, that I'll run to school and James Wycliffe will wave at me from the gas station. But each day I wake up, it's still 2025. And the more I look around, the more I begin to wonder, was I really asleep for 70 years? Or did something else happen? Something. No one is telling me. Something I was never supposed to remember. I stayed in that hospital for weeks, maybe months. Time felt slippery. Days bled into nights, and the more I tried to make sense of what happened to me, the more people around me spoke like I was fragile glass. They kept saying I had amnesia, that memory loss was common after such long-term unconsciousness. But that wasn't it. I remembered everything, just not what they expected me to remember. I could recall the number of tiles in my bathroom at home, the scent of my mother's perfume, lily and powder, the way the wooden stairs creaked on the third step. But I didn't remember ever signing up for any government experiment. I didn't remember being injected, tested, frozen, or preserved. One night I asked the nurse, a young woman named Kira, if they had any records of how I got there. She hesitated. Then she whispered something that chilled me. "We only found you because of a power outage. There's no file, no admission form, no staff log, no ID." She wasn't supposed to tell me that. She said she could get in trouble. But I could see in her eyes. She knew something didn't add up. And then, things got stranger. They moved me to a rehabilitation center in a quiet part of town. They said I needed to learn the modern world slowly. They gave me a room with soft lighting and fake plants. An older man, a so-called therapist, started coming in every morning to help reintegrate me. He always smiled, but it never reached his eyes. I asked for a television. They brought me one. But the news felt unreal. Wars in countries I'd never heard of. People talking in acronyms. Even the commercials made no sense. Pills for diseases I didn't know existed. Digital money. Cars that drove themselves. Then one day I asked if I could go outside. They hesitated again. Eventually they agreed, but only with a chaperone. So Kira took me for a walk. We passed glass buildings that reached the sky, screens plastered with moving images, people wearing things in their ears talking to themselves. I remember asking her, "Is this really the world? Or is this some elaborate play?" She smiled sadly. "That's what I asked myself when I moved to the city," she said. But I didn't believe her. Not fully. Because then, I saw something. A poster. Just a silly old advertisement on the side of a bus stop. But it had my name. Not Mrs. Ross. Not Margaret. It said, "Evelyn Ross. Still missing. Since 1954. It had my face. My young face. The same one from high school. It looked like it had been weathered, digitally aged, faded over decades. I froze. Kira noticed. She tried to move me along, but I pointed. "That's me," I said. "That was me. That is me." Kira's face went pale. She grabbed my arm and pulled me back toward the building. She didn't say a word the entire walk. That night, my room was locked from the outside. No nurse came, no food tray, no explanation, only silence. And that's when I started to truly panic. Because I realized something terrifying. Whoever these people were, they knew exactly who I was. And they were lying to me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, staring at the door, listening, waiting. It was locked. I tested it twice. They weren't treating me like a patient anymore. They were treating me like a secret. In the early hours, I did something foolish. I climbed up onto the dresser and pried open the ceiling tile above it. It was pure instinct. Maybe desperation. And that's when I found it. A small metal box. Old, rusted, dusty, tucked away like someone had forgotten it was ever there. Inside were papers, a photo, and something like a badge. The badge had the letters GDIS, something I'd never heard of. The photo was even more disturbing. It was me, as a teenager, standing beside two men in suits. One of them had his face blurred out with ink. On the back, someone had written, "Test subject 42 IFA. Phase 3 begins, July 2nd, 1954. I stared at that date for what felt like hours. That was the day I went to sleep. The day I never woke up. Until now. But I don't remember this. I never agreed to be anyone's test subject. So what did they do to me? I slipped the papers into the hem of my sweater, then carefully replaced the box. I knew if they caught me with it, they'd take it away. Maybe worse. The next morning, they unlocked my door like nothing had happened. "Breakfast?" they asked, smiling, as if they hadn't locked me in like a prisoner the night before. I played along. I smiled, ate, nodded, all while memorizing exits, counting staff, scanning rooms for cameras. Because something had changed inside me. Fear had turned to determination. I needed to get out. But before I could make any move, they came. Not the nurses, not the doctors. 2 men in gray suits, unsmiling, precise, cold. They introduced themselves as government representatives, but they never showed ID. "We'd like to ask you a few questions, Mrs. Ross," one said. I sat down, and for the next hour they grilled me. Not about my health, not about how I felt, but about what I remembered. "Do you recall any procedures before your incident? Were you in contact with anyone named Adler? Dr. Jerome Adler? Have you had dreams involving numbers, codes, buildings?" I said no, because I didn't, because they scared me. When they left, one of them turned and whispered, "You're not supposed to be awake." Those words followed me into the night. I unfolded the papers again under the blanket. There were coordinates scribbled beside my name, and a name, Facility Echo. Whatever that was, I had to find it, because I was starting to suspect something unthinkable. This wasn't just a coma, and this wasn't just 2025. This was something engineered, and I was the only one left who might know the truth. The next morning, I waited until the shift change. When the halls got busy and the staff stopped looking quite so closely at me, I slipped out of my room during medication rounds. No one noticed. Or maybe they did, and just didn't want to raise an alarm yet. I had memorized the layout of the building. Down the east corridor, past the therapy room, was a door marked "Staff Only." It had a keypad, but the nurse who brought my meals always typed the same code, 7-3-5-1. I remembered it because that's the year I should have died, if their math were right. It worked. The door clicked open. Inside, it was sterile and quiet, not like the fake warmth of the patient wing. Everything was gray, metallic, humming softly. I followed the hallway until I found a storage room filled with outdated medical files. Not computers, paper, boxes and boxes of it. I was scanning randomly, lost in a sea of files that made no sense, when I saw one word that made my heart stop. Echo, a thin file, no label on the front, just a red stamp. Cleared level 5, terminated. Inside were a few pages, some blacked out entirely, but there were names. 42A, Margaret Ross. 43B, Anthony Wells. 44C, Miriam Calloway. And on and on. All born in the 1930s, all terminated between 1954 and 1956. And next to many of them, scrawled in ink, woke up, neutralized. My stomach turned. This wasn't a coma recovery center. It was a containment unit. Every person like me who woke up was eliminated. I shoved the file into my coat and turned to leave, but I wasn't alone anymore. Kira stood in the doorway. Her face wasn't angry or shocked, just sad. "You weren't supposed to find that," she said. My throat went dry. "What is this place?" I whispered. She looked around, then stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "This used to be part of a Cold War project," she said quietly. "They experimented on children. Memory reprogramming, cryostasis, psychological imprinting, all top secret. Most of the facilities were buried, but sometimes One wakes up. Like you. I shook my head. But I was never part of... She cut me off. You were. You just don't remember. Then she pulled something from her pocket. A small, yellowed photograph. It was me, but I was holding hands with a little boy. And a woman, not my mother, stood behind us. This was taken inside Facility Echo, she said, before the shutdown. I stared at it, tears in my eyes. I didn't remember this place. I didn't remember this woman. And I certainly didn't remember the boy. Then Kira said something I'll never forget. You're not the only one still alive, Margaret. And just like that, I knew I had to run. Because if they'd found me, they'd find the others. And none of us were safe. We left just before dawn. Kira had stolen a keycard, changed my clothes, and given me her spare ID badge. She whispered instructions the entire way. Which door to take, which hallway had cameras, which exit would be left unguarded at shift change. The outside air was colder than I remembered. Or maybe it was just that everything felt unfamiliar. The street was quiet, but even the silence was different. Sterile, humming with invisible signals I couldn't name. We got into a car. Sleek, silent, nothing like the thunderous engines I remembered. She handed me a blanket, and beneath it, the file I had found, now joined by others she had taken. I've been waiting for this moment for over a year, she said, eyes on the road. I knew if one of you ever woke up, you'd start looking. And once you looked, I had to help. I asked her, again, what she knew. What really happened to us. She didn't know everything. No one did. But according to her, the project was called ECHO, because it wasn't just about freezing time. It was about bending it, playing with memory, identity, the nature of reality itself. They wanted to see if they could take children from the 1950s, she said, erase their families, memories, context, and implant new lives, then see if they could wake them up decades later as different people. But why? I asked. Because they wanted to create perfect agents, people without pasts, without attachments, soldiers, spies, workers who didn't question. If they could rewrite your memories, they could rewrite who you are. I felt sick. Was that what I was? A blank slate? A puppet? But if that was true, why did I remember so much of my life? Why did my past still feel so vivid? Unless the memories were planted, I whispered. Kira nodded slowly. It hit me like a punch. What if none of my memories were real? What if my home in 1954, my parents, James Wycliffe, never existed? Or worse, what if they did, and were taken from me on purpose? We drove for hours, following the coordinates I had found inside the file. A mountain range, cold, isolated, miles from the nearest town. As we neared the area, the GPS began to glitch. Kira frowned. That's not normal, she said. There's signal everywhere these days. And then we saw it, a rusted metal fence, half buried in snow and time. No sign, no guards, just a keypad, long dead, and a plaque so corroded we could barely read the letters beneath the rust. US Gov, Site Echo. My breath caught in my throat. It was real. Kira climbed the fence first. I followed. The facility was half collapsed. Nature had swallowed most of it. But one section still stood. A thick concrete bunker, barely visible from the outside. Inside, the air was heavy, smelled like rotten metal. But as our eyes adjusted, we saw them. Tubes, bods, rows of them. And inside some of them, bodies, preserved, still waiting. Some empty, some cracked. We weren't alone. Others had been here, and someone had released them. We moved carefully through the facility, our steps echoing down long-forgotten corridors. Most of the lights were dead. The air was damp, suffocating. And yet, there was power, somewhere. We could hear a low, pulsing hum behind the walls, like a machine still breathing in the dark. We passed rows of cryopods. Most were shattered, glass torn open from the inside. Others still glowed faintly, showing vitals, but flatlines. And then we found one that wasn't empty. Inside, a woman. Her skin pale, mouth slightly parted as if caught mid-sentence. Frozen, suspended. Her nameplate read, Calloway Miriam. Subject 44C. Status, dormant. I recognized the name. She was on the list, just like me. Kira leaned in, checked the vitals. She's alive, she whispered. But barely. Her neural activities, different. What does that mean? I asked. She's dreaming, Kira replied. They're keeping her mind inside a constructed reality. I stepped back. My knees weakened. Had I been in a dream like that? Is that why my memories feel so vivid, yet now so uncertain? What if the 1954 I remember wasn't real at all? Just a program they fed me? What if I was never from anywhere? As I struggled to breathe, something else caught my eye. A door at the end of the corridor. Metal, reinforced, marked, restricted, observation wing. We pried it open. Inside were observation rooms with thick glass walls, like hospital monitoring units. And on the far side of one, someone stood. A man, alive, breathing, awake. He looked up, startled by the light. Maybe in his 50s, worn, confused, but alive. Kira pressed the intercom. "Can you hear us?" she asked. He nodded slowly, then spoke in a voice that cracked with disuse. "Which year is it?" 2025, I answered. He sat down hard, shaking his head. "I thought I was the last," he said. "I thought I was the only one left." His name was Anthony Wells, subject 43B. He had woken up 5 years ago and been trapped here ever since. They ran tests, kept me in simulations. Sometimes I'd think I was home again, sometimes in a war zone, sometimes on the moon. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. I asked him why they stopped, why they abandoned the place. He paused, then whispered, "Because something went wrong. Some of us started remembering too much." I felt a chill spread through my bones. "Too much of what?" I asked. "Not just our lives, not just the facility, other lives, other versions of ourselves. Memories that didn't belong to us, but still felt real." Kira looked at me. Her face had gone pale. "I think that's what's happening to you," she said softly. I stepped back, heart pounding. Was that why I kept dreaming of doors I'd never opened? Of names I didn't know, but mourned like family? Of cities I'd never seen, burning in the distance? Anthony leaned forward, pressing his palm to the glass. "If you remember them, then you know. This wasn't an experiment about memory. It was about containment." And then the lights flickered. A sharp, electronic whine pierced the air, and one by one the pods around us began to power on. The hum turned into a whine, then a scream. Not human, not machine, but something between the two. The entire facility trembled, dust falling like snow from the ceiling. And all around us, cryopods came to life, glowing blue, beeping, opening. Kira backed up against the wall. "That's not supposed to happen," she whispered. Anthony grabbed the intercom, panicked. "Shut it down! You have to shut it down!" "I don't know how," Kira shouted. "I didn't start it!" And then they started waking up. Not just one or two, but dozens. Men, women, children. Some staggering, some unconscious, some screaming as if emerging from nightmares too deep to escape. One boy sat up in his pod and began to sob. He looked no older than 10. A woman clutched at her chest and screamed, "Where's my baby? Where's my baby?" They were all different ages, different ethnicities, but they had one thing in common. They were all out of time. Their clothes, their hair, their voices. Decades behind the world they were now inside. I moved through them slowly, helping where I could. But something inside me was changing. I could feel it. My skin buzzed. My hands trembled. My vision blurred, not from fear but from flashes. Memories, but not mine. A burning building. A silver room. A face with no eyes whispering numbers into my ears. A name. Adler. "Doctor. Jerome Adler," I murmured. Anthony turned toward me sharply. "Where did you hear that name?" I don't know. I just remembered it." He stepped back, horror in his face. That name was scrubbed from the records. If you remember Adler, then they didn't finish their wipe on you. Kira looked between us, confused. "Who is he?" Anthony's voice dropped. "He was the lead architect of Project Echo, the man who designed the simulations. He didn't just test memory. He implanted it. He believed he could create perfect humans by layering different versions of consciousness inside one mind." Kira paled. "That's not possible." "It wasn't," Anthony said, "until Margaret." Everyone was looking at me now. I could barely stand. My head throbbed. Memories collided like shattered glass in a whirlpool. Me, holding a rifle. Me, dancing in a red dress. Me, behind a desk filled with symbols I couldn't read. None of those versions were me. And yet, they were. I dropped to my knees. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Who am I?" Anthony crouched beside me. "You're the Nexus," he said. "The convergence point. They tried it with others, but only you survived multiple implants. You're not just Margaret Ross. You're dozens of people, lives, personalities, timelines, all layered into you." Kira knelt too, gripping my hand. "That's why they tried to shut it down," she said. "You didn't wake up, you broke through." That's when I heard the sound. Distant, metallic, growing louder. A door opening somewhere deep in the bunker. And then footsteps, heavy, purposeful, not hurried. Anthony froze. Kira rose to her feet, pulling a metal rod from a nearby cart. "We're not alone anymore," she whispered. The others had gone quiet. Even the newly awakened stood in eerie silence, as if something in their bones recognized what was coming. And suddenly, every instinct in me, every voice from every memory I'd ever been given, screamed the same thing. Run. The footsteps grew louder. Deliberate. Not rushed, not panicked. Like whoever was coming already knew we were there. Like they expected us. Anthony backed toward the crowd of survivors. Kira stood by the door, weapon raised. I just froze. A figure stepped into view. He wore no protective gear, no mask, no uniform, just a dark gray coat and gloves. His hair white, slicked back, his eyes cold and analytical, but not unkind. He looked almost ordinary, but I knew, before he spoke, before he opened his mouth, Dr. Jerome Adler. "You've come a long way, Margaret," he said, voice calm. "Farther than we ever predicted." I didn't respond. He took another step forward. "I was hoping this moment wouldn't come," he said. "That you would wake, assimilate, live a quiet life in the timeline we built for you. But you always resisted. My voice came out sharp, shaking. You built my life? He nodded as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Yes. Margaret Ross, the girl from 1954, the daughter of Julie and Charles, the one who liked lavender, who dreamed of James Wycliffe. That was your anchor identity. A blend of safe emotional patterns and cultural timestamps designed to stabilize the deeper layers. I stared at him, unable to breathe. He was saying my entire life was fabricated. Memories, places, people I loved, constructed, engineered, scripts in a simulation. Kira lunged forward. "You're insane!" she spat. "You stole their lives." Adler didn't flinch. "I preserved them. The world that existed in 1954 is gone. War, famine, climate collapse. These subjects were given the chance to survive, to evolve. You turned us into lab rats," Anthony growled. Adler glanced at him, almost pitying. "You were vessels. You still are. But Margaret is something else entirely." He looked back at me, softer now. "You are the breakthrough. You survived 18 layers. You carry soldier, artist, diplomat, assassin, mother, orphan. You are the sum of what humanity could be." I shook my head. Tears burned behind my eyes. "I don't want to be all of them," I said. "I want to be me." Adler smiled. "I know, and that's why it's working." The others had gathered now, watching. Some remembered him, some didn't, but all of them felt it, the gravity of his presence. He stepped closer again. "I didn't come to harm you, Margaret," he said quietly. "I came to offer you a choice." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small black device. No buttons, just a faint red glow. "You can come with me. We finish what we started. We reintegrate the fragments. No more confusion. No more questions. You'll finally understand everything, from every life you've lived." I stared at the device. It pulsed in sync with my heartbeat. "And if I refuse?" I asked. He looked around at the awakening facility, the blinking lights, the rising energy. "Then they'll come for you," he said. "The system was built to contain you, but now that you're awake, it sees you as a threat, and it's already reactivating." He looked sad, not theatrical, just tired. "I didn't want it to end like this," he said, "but you have to choose." Silence fell. Everyone turned to me. Anthony whispered, "Don't trust him." Kira stepped forward. "We can run. We can fight. You're not alone." And I didn't know what was real anymore. But I knew one thing. If I went with him, I'd never come back. Not as Margaret. Not as anyone. I stood there, caught between two lives. Behind me, Kira, Anthony, the others. Survivors like me. Pieces of forgotten time clinging to scraps of memory. In front of me, Doctor. Adler, calm as ever, holding out the device like it was a gift, or a trap. Everything inside me screamed to run, but something deeper whispered. "You already ran once, for 70 years. I took a breath. "What happens if I press it?" I asked. Adler tilted his head. "You'll remember," he said. "Everything, even the versions of you that never existed. The simulations, the lives we seeded in parallel, the moments when you chose differently, in other timelines." My hands trembled. "Why me?" "Because you were the only one who didn't collapse. The others!" He nodded toward Anthony, toward the silent observers. "Their minds broke, but you adapted." He took a step closer. "You evolved. That's what Echo was trying to prove. That memory isn't linear. That identity is fluid. That humanity can transcend time if it's untethered from reality." I looked at Kira. She shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with fear. "You're not a god," she said to him. "You're just a man who broke people." Adler smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I didn't break her," he said. "She's the one who broke through." Silence. Then, I took the device. It pulsed in my palm, warm, alive, almost breathing. I closed my eyes, and for a brief, flickering second, I saw them. All of them. Me, as a nurse in 1912, tending to plague victims in silence. Me, as a resistance fighter in 1943, staring down the barrel of a Nazi gun. Me, in 1986, running from men in hazmat suits through the forests of Chernobyl. Me, in a tower of glass in 2090, looking down at a city I'd helped build, and fearing it would destroy me. Hundreds of lives, some joyful, most painful. But they were me, or versions of me, constructs maybe, or echoes. I dropped the device. It clattered to the ground. "No," I said. Adler's face fell. "No? I don't want all of them. I don't want to become 1,000 ghosts just to understand your theory. I want to be Margaret, even if she was a lie. She's my lie." The floor trembled again. Sparks burst from the walls. The facility was waking up or collapsing. I couldn't tell anymore. Kira grabbed my arm. "We have to go now." Anthony threw open the emergency doors. The others, the recently awakened, followed blindly. Adler stood still in the center of the room. "You'll regret this," he said. "No," I said softly. "But maybe you will." We ran. The heelways lit up behind us in bursts. Red lights, sirens, warning systems screaming as the facility initiated self-seal protocols. Doors began to close. Kira shoved her badge into one panel. Anthony pried another open with a broken rod. Behind us, I heard Adler call out, not to us, but to the system. "Override. Level 0. Execute containment collapse." His voice shook, like he hadn't planned for this, like he was no longer in control. That's when I realized maybe I wasn't just the experiment that survived. Maybe I was the glitch, the one thing they couldn't predict, the one they couldn't contain. We burst through the final door, the cold night air hitting my face like a promise. Behind us, the facility groaned, a dying beast swallowing itself whole. We ran into the darkness, hearts pounding, lungs burning. The world outside was the same, yet different. Bright lights, distant sirens, shadows that seemed to watch. Kira glanced back, whispering, "We're not safe yet." Anthony nodded. "They'll come, and they won't stop." But I felt something else, a quiet calm, because I knew the truth now. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a choice, a fracture in time, a ripple in memory. Maybe I was the last echo of a life that never truly existed. Or maybe I was the first spark of something new. As the dawn crept over the horizon, I looked at the sky. The stars were still there, distant, eternal. And in that moment I realized, no matter where I come from, or how many versions of me exist, I am here, and that is enough. Thank you for listening to my story. Maybe, in some way, we're all echoes, searching for who we really are.